So we live in very ironic times. The project of European integration and European solidarity is marching on, and it seems very successful. But the irony is, it's very successful among the European patriots, among those who call for national sovereignty, those who wave their flags proudly, the people that you wouldn't expect to promote European solidarity if you watched just mainstream media. Here we have an interesting post from Visegrad 24 about the percentages of respondents from European countries who want less migrants. And if you see here, you'll see that almost everyone says it's too many.
Isn't democracy wonderful, Stelios, that almost everyone is just like, yes, a significant portion as well.
Yeah.
Averaging at about, 70% maybe, and the parts that are slightly less in favour of it are parts that receive far less immigration.
Yes. And
well, the politicians are the direct inverse of this.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And one thing to say about democracy really quick is that democracy to work requires a common culture. Democratic multiculturalism is a very weird thing. It's
Aristotle
contradiction in
talks
terms.
about it, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And it's actually a very prophetic quote, and Aristotle's sort of on the money that you can't have democratic rule if you don't have a native culture.
Exactly. And he does say that tyrants are those who are going to side with foreigners against their own people. Are just going to let this hanging. That's Aristotle from Politics. Right. So you see here, Spain is a country of first reception. It's 70%, Italy 74%, Cyprus 84%, and Greece is 90%.
Well, that's because Greece is right on the front line. You're like the,
It's like Osgiliath.
Like there. You're like the Spartans at Thermopylae, aren't you? They're holding off the hordes of barbarians.
Yes. So we had some very interesting scenes of people coming together these last few days, people that we wouldn't expect to see them together. So here we have a very moving scenes by people who wave Irish and English flags and also
it's
Union
the
Jacks.
Northern Irish flag.
Yes. So we see here. Would you expect to see this?
I didn't expect to see this. I have seen this video, but before this, I thought that this was unthinkable. I think it's one of the most heartening things about everything that's going on at the minute is that in Europe, at least, all of the patriotic people are siding with each other. In France, the Netherlands, Germany, England, Ireland, we're all sticking up for each other. And we're saying, we want you to have your own countries. We've realised that our differences are not so stark compared to those of the people being imported into our countries. And actually, we realise that we can coexist with other Europeans, that Europeans and other Europeans, we're fine, right?
Yes. Take the French, for example. They are, of course, based vile curs, but I want them to persist.
You're not helping.
No, I am. I want.
It's part of the banter.
Yes, despite the fact they are, of course, the ancient enemy, I still want them to be there doing, in France, doing the French stuff.
Mm-hmm. I think there's this level of sentimentality that also Americans and Canadians and Australians have for Britain, and of course, vice versa. I've got a lot of fondness for those countries as well, and I want you all to succeed because. Many of the people who watch this show are some very lovely people, and you don't deserve to live in a country that tyrannizes you.
Exactly. So what I'm going to do with this segment is I'm going to show you a lot of European solidarity among nations, and we are going to talk a bit about the notion of European identity, because European identity can coexist with national identity without having to squash it, as multiculturalists are saying, especially those who run the EU. So we have here trouble in Ireland. There was civil unrest there. You have the police was again about to crack down protests against mass migration. The same thing that we see over here.
Do you have the clip from Northern Ireland where you have the woman speaking on a tannoy saying, live rounds will soon presume, please disperse from the area, in the most dystopian thing I've ever heard? Not live rounds. Live rounds would imply real bullets, but Like,
I don't, but I'm gonna have it here. And it seemed like a psyops video, because it was just basically a square with a very small square covered with four with vehicles from four sides, and essentially there was no one there to walk.
Well, I did also find, I think it's that video in the top right there, if you can click on it and play it. Yeah.
This one.
Yes, where they're throwing Molotovs at the vehicle, and then eventually they say, "Can you leave?" It was very...
Attention, attention. This is a police message. The crowd should disperse immediately, as force is about to be used against violent individuals.
This is like an elevator voice.
It's so
that's the exact voice that you get at Heathrow Airport, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
To be
Ground
fair,
floor.
Yes.
To be fair, if someone used force against me at Heathrow Airport, I'd just be like, "Oh, finally, put me out of my misery." Airports.
Here we have Union Jacks and Irish flags held up together outside City Hall. Huge symbolic significance. This will cause more concern to any globalist government than rioting or public disturbances. People standing united equals power. I think that this is really important because, you see, I think progressivism is basically a divide and conquer strategy. If you abstract from the particular beliefs that some progressives have right now, it is a divide and conquer strategy. And you try to play divide and conquer against a potentially or actually united front of people who can be a threat to your agenda.
Well, the intersectional ideology is like how you maximize that strategy, isn't it? Because it's like race, religion, blah, 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 blah. All the demographic categories get their own special treatment. And all it does is fracture people into smaller and smaller groups to be controlled.
Exactly. And we are constantly bombarded by the message that civil society, European identity, and European culture is irredeemably bad. And it requires a massive state to intervene and allow room for people to breathe. But that in practice means that we have European governments who are essentially trying to squash national identity. And the people are not having it. So we see here also in Belfast, Irish and British nationalists are standing side by side protesting against mass immigration while the left tries to shut them down. Tricolor and Union Jack on one side, rainbow flags and Antifa flags on the other.
And Palestinian ones.
Yes.
The unholy alliance.
That's interesting because if you bear in mind, the notion of European solidarity has been almost entirely used by the left, almost entirely used by progressive multiculturalists who really despise national identity within Europe. Whereas they seem to promote the interests of identities from outside Europe.
So I've been toying with the notion of simplifying all of my political thinking down to the level of decent human beings versus dysgenic, perverted freaks.
I don't know if I would put it in that those terms, and I don't think if these categories help. But I think that it's ultimately
It kind of
cultural.
looks like it, though, doesn't it?
You could say that among European cultures,
Yes,
you have a lot of cultural continuities. There are some cultural discontinuities, but for the most part, a lot of European cultures are continuous with each other
but
in a way that they're discontinuous with.
But good-looking people versus perverts and freaks. I mean, it does seem to be the root of all of the left-right division, doesn't it?
Well, I don't know. Well, let's see. We have this post here by Killian. Keir Starmer has only been in office for 1 month, and already there's been Roma gypsies rioting in Leeds, children fatally stabbed in Southport, and now riots across the UK, with Catholics and Protestants uniting against him in Northern Ireland. He won't last for much longer. So the people are not having it. The rhetoric of division, of hatred, of the irredeemably bad people within Western countries, it just doesn't convince people anymore. And here we have a lot of people from Vienna, July the 20th, campaigning on this message: the kids want remigration. Now, from the European authorities, the EU authorities, the bureaucratic ones, this is portrayed as a racist message, but people are fed up with this idea. They're fed up with the notion that if you just care about the safety of yourself, your kids, and your family, and your neighbors, and also your compatriots, you're a bad person. It's completely annoying tiring, and no one cares about it anymore.
We're going to see this message a lot more, because ending immigration is not quite enough, because the level of migration already here is intolerable.
Yes, and you can say that a lot of people who should be deported aren't deported on the basis of fake and phony abuses of the rhetoric of human rights.
And many countries have done it before. India did it. They kicked out people who weren't Indian. So,
Dan, you see here the French are trying to post something to your liking. England for the English, France for the French.
Here.
Do you approve this message?
Yes, that is correct. Well done, you French people.
Here we have in Toulouse, in France, solidarity to the victims of the Southport stabbings, to the victims that lost their lives, because there are more victims. And they have posters there in Toulouse saying European lives matter, Southport. I don't see what...
Can you imagine what you would get if you put up a poster like that in this country? You'd be in jail for like 5 years.
Yeah, well, stickers is enough, apparently.
I think, though, that a lot of people are are using that rhetoric even more, because the demonization of civil society is just making people more angry. It doesn't make things less angry. And we saw by Keir Starmer's address that he wasn't remotely interested in de-escalating the situation.
No, he's very interested in escalating it.
Yeah. See, we also have here another post by someone from France. He's talking about the beginnings of racial civil war in England. He says, hordes of migrants attack natives with politicians and media along with them. The native people are left to fend for themselves, as in France. The European people must react or die. So there is a sentiment of European solidarity on the basis of a common threat. This is a bit unfortunate that sometimes, people recognize what common they have when they have common threats, but that's human nature, that's history, and that's where we are right now. So we are going to talk about some patterns that we notice among a lot of European nations, and I'm not afraid to notice them, and I'm not afraid to speak about them. And you will see that essentially you have people talking about the same thing, about crimes, and you have a whole establishment using media and all other institutions trying to use a narrative that is going to stir the direction yet again towards an empty, abstract multiculturalism that erodes national identity, erodes any kind of identity, and treats nations as geographic regions. We have here we are going to talk about Ireland, France, and Germany, and we are going to draw some similarities. So here we have, this is old news. This is from November 25, 2023. We have, by Colin Rugg, Irish Prime Minister Leo Varadkar vows new hate speech laws in response to the Dublin riots after a migrant stabbed multiple people. What a coward. So again, we have the same thing. We have stabbings from a migrant. And we have a whole apparatus of political leadership that goes and virtue signals compassion, but compassion in words that doesn't translate into action is fake compassion. The response to these attacks, where you're definitely not going to think of this in any way that suggests that our project of multiculturalism is to be criticized or rejected. Personally, I reject it and criticize it. So we have here again, the apparatus in the Irish Times started talking about the far right and the right, and how this is going to be projected. Now, one thing to say is that the Irish people have said no to migration multiple times, and they had also referendums on the 8th of March, and a lot of people were saying that they weren't about migration, but you can say that they are, because what happened is that they had both the family and the care referendum, and they lost 67% on the first one, on the family amendment, and 74% on the care amendment. Now, let me say why this can be about immigration, and this was precisely going to be used about mass migration, because what they try to do, if you look at both referendums, is essentially create a facade of legitimacy for arbitrarily defining who requires economic support, by arbitrarily defining who is a member of a particular family, by defining families as durable relationships. So that was all about creating a facade of legitimacy for arbitrarily extracting economic resources from the Irish people in order to host a lot of immigrants that are come to Ireland with all the mass migration policies that the EU is being promoting. Now, here, let's go to France. In France, we had a very unfortunate incident last
this
year.
is horrific, this one.
8th of June 2023. I remember, everyone was sick when we watched it. It was just horrific, as events are now. And if obviously we're not going to show things because they're very violent, but we had one person who went, a 31-year-old Syrian who had refugee status in Sweden and tried 3 times to gain sort of a status in France, but was rejected, and went in the park and stabbed a lot of.
He was just running around stabbing children and babies.
Yes, and the response here was just insane. We have here people saying, this is David Moore saying, this is not an immigration issue. This is about the appalling knife epidemic in France. Did you know that a man who was born in France once stabbed someone? So what this illustrates, and a lot of people who are uninitiated into the ways of argumentation do, and especially leftists do it, is ignoring the distinction between possibility and probability. Yes, of course, there are people who are natives and they stab other people who are also natives or non-natives. The question is one of probability. And I want to Josh explain it here.
Hey, it's me.
So here we have one of the big moments, or one of the interesting...
This has been shared far and wide, yes. Do you want me to read it?
No, I want... could you please tell us that someone, Tariq Nasheed, couldn't understand the idea of overrepresentation of some...
He was saying cherry-picking black crime articles to repost on Twitter all day to justify your pre-existing anti-black hatred is a form of white supremacy. And I just posted some FBI crime statistics at him. 14% of the population and 51.2% of murders and 52.7% of the robberies. The numbers don't lie. I'm saying, hey, it's not people misrepresenting cases, it's statistics. And then what followed was quite possibly the dumbest reply he could have possibly come up with. So, Josh, how is that logistically possible? Not logically possible, logistically possible, that only 14% of the population can commit over 50% of the crimes? Well, Tariq, let me tell you.
So can we just establish that he isn't being ironic?
He's not, because he continued not to understand it in the replies.
I don't understand how you cannot understand that.
Well, all of his followers also didn't understand. They couldn't understand that certain people can be more violent than other people and commit more crimes despite being fewer people. They just see one number bigger than the other, and they think that means the bigger number is the badder one.
And
I'm not getting this.
And you will see that basically the narrative of the multiculturalist regressives, or so-called progressives, is essentially to publish these data, not in every country, but publish this data in order to steer the narrative to give only an economic interpretation. Poverty does play a role in crime. This goes beyond doubt, but it is not the only factor. And you could say that sometimes some cultures are a bit more prone to violence than other cultures. And the narrative that is being used for them, that is solely economic, again boils down to we are going to extract resources from you in order to give more money. Let's pump more money into these communities. So we have here, again, in France, we have a display of compassion. France Security Assembly hold a moment's silence for those involved in the stabbing in Annecy. This reminds me a bit of projecting the pink color or the purple color in Westminster.
Oh, after the Southport attack, when Keir Starmer just lit up Downing Street in pink.
Yes. So, yes, there are displays of solidarity, but at the end of the day, that's all rhetoric. Unless it is accompanied by action, it doesn't mean anything. And we had here yet again the same thing. A lot of articles were immediately written. This is from Le Monde in France. French right and far right jostle for political advantage following knife attack in Annecy. So the first concern, the main concern people had there is for the right and the far right to not try to use it for their own agenda. I think that this is appalling. We have here someone saying children and elderly are stabbed in Annecy and Islamophobia is trending. It is not Islamophobic to not want children, elderly, women, or anyone stabbed to death because they're not of a certain faith. And this shows the disconnect between the elites and the people. A lot of people just don't feel safe. They don't feel safe, and every time they're talking about it, every time they try to express their feelings of lack of safety, they're being told, you're a racist. You don't matter. Your voice doesn't matter. We have here another perspective. This is what happens when you bring in people who hate you. This is the vast disconnect between how a lot of people are viewing things and how a lot of people from the managerial elite class is trying to convey. Here we have yet another stabbing incident in Germany. Dan, you remember this? We presented about it together. We had a horrific attack from what seems to be a political Islamist to Michael Sturzenberger, who is someone who is basically campaigning for, as it says there, decades of campaign to oppose political Islamism. And there was just someone who just went there and stabbed Michael Sturzenberger, and then there was a fight there, and there was a policeman that tried to intervene, and the policeman got stabbed. Again, we have here a post by Imtiaz Mahmoud, the same thing. People started talking about the far right. In Mannheim, Germany, a young police officer, El Reuven, I think was his name, was murdered by an Afghan Islamist, Suleiman A., and 5 other people are injured. The reaction in Mannheim is a demonstration against the right. Germany has fallen. Here we have what happened to someone who did speak about statistics in Germany that the police circulated. That is May the 8th, 3 months ago. We have here a young AfD politician convicted after publishing gang rape statistics in connection with Afghan migration. And basically she was fined and she was essentially persecuted. For what? For actually talking about official data and giving an interpretation that is different from the strictly economic one.
I mean, to cut it down to the nub, she was convicted for telling the truth.
Yes. And we have 2 more things to say that shows that the rhetoric of escalation between the governing multiculturalists and the people who are not having it is essentially leading to a crisis of legitimacy. And this is a problem, because for now all public discussion about this has sort of lost its currency, has lost its meaning, because when they're constantly smearing the people as far right for caring about the safety, when they smear them about as far right, there comes a question: what is the far right? Why do they never define it? They don't define it as, they can't define it. We have here a classic video by Helen McEntee who just can't define it. She accuses people of being far right, but when they ask her, well, what is the far right? She can't explain it. This is up there for everyone. This has basically been immortalized. And I want to say something about the UK, about Starmer's rhetoric of escalation now, and his unfortunate choice to dismiss the concerns of the English community about the murders. And by calling them far right, he basically achieved the exact opposite of what possibly someone rational in his case would presumably want. And the more you call people far right, at some point, they're eventually not going to care. If far right means to the left of Marx, then people are not going to care anymore. And people have lost care anymore. And you see here, if you write the hashtag that circulated on Twitter this weekend, the far-right thugs unite, you have a lot of people who are just going and say, apparently I'm a far racist thug. I want to, and you can scroll down here. This is endless. You have people just saying, well, here, apparently I'm a far-right thug. You have endlessly people just saying, well, I don't care about it,
Well, all this is doing is unifying people internally in Britain, which in turn unifies them with the rest of Europe and creates a popular movement against immigration, which we so desperately need, don't we?
Yep.
So, ironic times, European integration and European solidarity is marching on, and Europeans want to make Europe great again.
I hope you appreciated that segment from the podcast The Lotus Eaters, and if you want to see what else we're getting up to, you can follow our series Lads Hour on the website, where we normally have a lot of fun, but sometimes we talk about serious topics as well. And if you want to see all the other work we're putting out, you can follow us on Twitter, and you won't miss a thing. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.